Hey, welcome. My name is Aaron White. I'm with the A-List team, and in today's video, I'm going to be diving deeper into what is a comparable market analysis, otherwise known as CMA. And in that, we're going to be covering several things. What is the purpose for both buyers and sellers? It's important you get both lenses, whether you're a buyer or a seller, because you're dealing with the other side too. And we're talking about numbers here. We're talking about negotiating and all the juicy details, right? So purpose for both buyers and sellers. How to read a CMA, we're going to show you an example here in Katy, Texas. What does that look like coming from the MLS and important things to look out for? And then last of all, what is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal? They both kind of sound similar, so it's important that you are educated in how to understand the differences and when they will be used and by whom they'll be used. So let's dive in. Okay, so a comparable market analysis is a tool used to help buyers and sellers make pricing decisions. Pricing for an offer in the case of a buyer, and in the case of a seller, what price might they want to list it and sell at, right? So let's look at this from the eyes of a buyer. A buyer would look at things for A, making a fair offer price, or maybe they want a deal, so they'll offer a little bit lower. They'll look at the data they can use to negotiate and back up why they made their offer and how they made their offer. And then of course they want to avoid overpaying for a property. It would stink to go pay more than maybe the deal that they could have gotten on that property because the market's softer for whatever reason in that area, right? So those are some reasons for the buyer. Sellers are going to look at it from a different perspective. They're going to look at several things. One, they want to know what is a fair list price given the market that they're in, right? They want to look at other things too, is what upgrades might you consider to get top dollar? Some easy things for getting top dollar, of course, are things like paint. It's one of the cheaper items you can do, even touch-up paint, to help you get a better offer on that home. It makes the house smell fresh too. Last of all, this is really important too, is the days of market goal. A seller typically is selling a house because they are moving somewhere or whatever reason, and maybe you're in a position where you can't have two mortgages out there. So understanding the price you list and the time it takes to sell or move that property are two very important things for the seller as well. And so we'll look at things like days on market, which are really important for the seller. Okay, so now let's talk about how to read a CMA. Now keep in mind that your realtor should be doing a good bit of cleaning of data in order to get you the right data that's closest to the property that you have or the property that you're looking at, right? Now, this always depends on how much data is actually out there. Sometimes there's just not a lot of recent data and your realtor has very little to work with. So we might look at further distances, neighboring neighborhoods, other things like that to try to get you data to make your decisions out of. Other things we might tweak is timeline as well if there's little data in there. But assuming that there is good data in your neighborhood, we want to look at several different things when you're reading a CMA. First, we want to look at the square footage and the lot size to ensure that the property you're looking at that's sold is of similar size to your property. Of course, we want to look at the number of bedrooms and the number of bathrooms that house has, because that can impact value of a property in that neighborhood. And of course, we want to look at days on market. If it has a really high days on market compared to other properties in the area, then probably the market rejected that price for a while until finally a buyer got there. So if it has a high days on market, it's possible that that was priced incorrectly. Now, it could be something functional about that house. Maybe there was foundation issues that weren't disclosed or something. You don't necessarily always know, but you might see trends where certain price points have higher days on market. So if you're a seller not wanting to have long days on market, that's something important to keep in mind. If you're a buyer looking at houses that are sitting on the market for a longer time, it might be worth a slightly lower offer, as maybe that seller needs to sell and might accept an offer slightly below their asking price, right? And then of course we want to look at the sold price per square foot. Now this is one of the most important numbers that we're going to look at when we're trying to determine a value of another property. So for example, if I see a house that is 1,300 square foot that's sold, and I have a house that I'm looking at buying, and maybe it's 13,050 square feet, I'm going to take that price per square foot and multiply it by the square footage of the prospective property I'm buying, And that can be a valuation of that property for the purpose of a comparable market analysis. It's not how an appraiser would look at it, but it's the closest we're going to get to with a comparable market analysis and making a decision on what a property might be worth with a purchase of that. And the other thing too that a realtor can look at, the report I'm showing you doesn't have photos. A lot of times we'll try to get very similar properties and send it to you in this way in a report. Very simple. You could just look at those key data points and make a decision on your offer price or your list price. However, a realtor can dive in and show you photos of the houses if there's a lot of big changes. Like for example, if one house is priced $20 a square foot higher than another, it's probably because it had an upgraded kitchen or upgraded bathroom or some sort of feature about it that was much more attractive. Okay, so let's dive now into what is a CMA versus what is an appraisal. Both of them can give you a valuation or an estimate, a very educated estimate on the value of a home. But how are they different? And they're night and day different, really, and they're made for different purposes. So let's dive into this. First of all, who does what? Realtor will do your CMA. We can get you a CMA at the A-list team as an example, right? An appraiser is going to do, of course, the appraisal, right? Now, why are they done? CMA is used as a tool to help sellers get a listing price and help buyers estimate an offer price. And then an appraisal is made to protect an investment of a bank. Now, I have seen multiple times where a seller may also get an appraisal done on their house in order to have a second opinion on pricing and really make sure that their investment they've invested into that home is getting top dollar or top possible dollar in the market, right? So very common. Just understand if you're a seller that if a buyer comes along, that buyer will also have to get another appraisal, and it may not have the same determinant results on their appraisal report as the first appraisal that they got. There could be a number of different reasons behind that, but it may not always be the same. The buyer has to get a second appraisal simply because there's several laws that passed after 2008 that require the buyer's lender to issue an unbiased appraisal. They can't pick who it is. It's issued by a third-party company. They have no say, and it has to be done that way in order to get the backing of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and all those other loans, right? So that's out there. Just be aware of that. Now let's get into some of the differences between an appraisal and a CMA. You've already kind of seen a CMA. You understand the purpose and how to read it. That's already been covered. So let's cover now into several things. One, it's more rigorous. The state actually defines in Texas how an appraiser must go about determining a value of a property. It's a little bit different in Texas for a CMA. A realtor doesn't necessarily have the same rigor. You might get very different CMAs from different realtors giving you different values. And if for example, a realtor is trying to come to you and say, let me get your listing from you, they might want to show you a really high number, but it may not actually be a fair value of what your house is worth based on several other things, right? So keep that in mind. Now, when we look at what an appraiser does, they're going to look at reconciling what's called different methods of determining value for your home. This can be sales comparable, which is similar to what you find in a CMA. It could be a construction cost. So for example, let's say you have a 2024 brand new construction. Well, maybe there's not a lot of brand new houses in your neighborhood that sold, so it might be hard to get a proper CMA for that property. You can do a construction cost model. An appraiser will be able to do that to determine the cost to build that new, right? And another approach. Another approach could be income model, right? So maybe it generates a certain amount of rental income in this neighborhood versus that neighborhood, and maybe the valuation is higher there because of the rents in that neighborhood. So they may approach it that way, and then they can, of course, reconcile these three models together to give you what they assume to be the value of that home, right? So it's much more complex when an appraiser looks at compared to a realtor with a CMA. They'll also look at several different things like what was your home made out of, and different types of foundations, piping, etc. that impact things. And of course, they're going to look at obsolescence. And as a realtor, we should be looking at obsolescence too. For example, does it back up to a noisy refinery or a factory or something like that, or a busy street, right? Those things can impact home values significantly, but they're going to come up with more of a mathematical approach to this and look at data and see maybe when other houses that sold backing up to the same property, what was the price difference between that, apply that price difference, so on and so forth, whereas realtors don't always have the same mathematical rigor to applying a discount for those things, right? And then last of all, their reporting is regulated, it's standardized, and they have to show how they got their value. With a CMA, you don't really see how they pick the properties that are in front of you. You're trusting your realtor has enough knowledge of that area in order to pick the right houses, but an appraiser is going to actually show their work, right? And say, hey, this is the number and the data that we used to get there. So I hope this helps you understand some of the differences between a CMA and appraisal. Now you understand how to read an appraisal, and you understand from a seller and a buyer's perspective how the other side is looking at that same CMA in determining the price of a home or the offer to make on your home. See you at the closing table.